Hi everyone, this is Nikki from the design team, and today I have a really fun project. We are going to be looking at these two cards. Now, they look similar, but we've done two different techniques to create this with an embossing folder. I'm going to use the same embossing folder just to show you the difference in the techniques and the same colors. But this is an embossing folder from Honeybee Stamps called Soiree. It has a nice middle section where you can put a sentiment. And we're going to look at different ways to use embossing powder on your embossing folders and the different looks that those give. Now I'm starting with an A2 size card, and you see that I'm adjusting this inside the folder. Because this has a center area where we can put a sentiment, I want to make sure that I have it evenly in the center of this paper. Now, if you don't want to worry about that, you can cut a larger size paper and then do your cutting down to A2 after that. But for me, this is easier. I sent this through the die cutting machine, and here is what we end up with. Gorgeous on its own, even before we put any type of embossing powder on it, but the embossing powder is just going to make it more awesome. I'm grabbing a sticky mat, and for this technique, having something to adhere your piece of paper to really helps. I'm going to add some anti-static powder over the entire panel. Make sure you do a good job powdering this, and that will give you less, it'll make sure that our embossing powder sticks to where it needs to. Now, this first technique is what I would call ink swiping. So we're going to use a clear ink, the embossing ink from Wow, and we're going to carefully, that's the reason I'm pressing this down to the sticky mat, carefully swipe over the top. We're trying just to hit only the raised areas. So you're doing this very lightly. You don't want to squish all the ink into the pad. You just want to be able to hit and run over the 3D portion of this. And I have definitely practiced with this, so I do this a lot, and you kind of get the feel for it. So you may take a couple of times that you need to practice, but you'll get the feel for just touching those areas. Next, we're going to start with our lightest blue color. Pro tip, probably not a good idea to pour your embossing powder over your sticky mat. Sticky mats do wipe off, but not the best idea on my part here. I'm going to add this light blue to a few areas of this folder, and just do it randomly, because when you shake it off, you're still going to get some of that coverage. And I'm going to only do two colors of blue that will all be linked in the description below. But I just thought that these two colors look really nice together, and they give a great contrast. So now I'm going to take my darker blue and start filling in the areas that are left over and tapping it off. So just kind of fill in where you want to. You can always add more of the light blue. You're just going to need to change out your coffee filter so that you're not getting these two colors mixed together. Some of that may happen anyway, just from fallout, but for the most part, I was able to keep those separate. I realized I think I want just a little bit more dark blue in this corner, so I'm going to go ahead and pour some on there. If all else fails, you can add more embossing ink if you need to, but most of the time, just pouring really gives me some fun colors and variation that I really like in these panels. Now remember, we rubbed the ink over the top of this raised area. This is going to be a little different than our next card. So remember, we're using the raised side right now. On our next card, we're going to do the opposite. So I'm still just adding different colors and kind of placing them where I want to. You do have to be careful with your panel, because you don't want to rub off any of that excess and leave a little blank spot from your embossing powder. Now, those small mistakes are very easily fixable. If you've got a few pieces of powder in this white area that you don't need to be there, just take yourself a little brush, kind of break up the static, and you'll see I keep lifting it to the camera. What I'm doing is blowing on the panel. So once I loosen a few pieces, I'm blowing off that panel. You can also flick the back of it if you want. Once again, I'm doing this over my sticky mat, not advised, but that's how it goes. Now, when you're ready to heat this, using some type of tweezers, these are tweezers that are called reverse hold tweezers. It's nice to get a good hold on your piece so that you can use the heat tool to get all of this embossing powder melted. Just be careful with your fingers, and make sure when you're placing your little tweezers that you're not hitting any of the places you want to heat up or knocking off the embossing powder, so you don't leave a little white spot right there. So sometimes when you heat it up, there's a little area, especially when you're doing these 3D embossing folders, because everything sticking up on the front of the card is at different levels to make that 3D look. You may need to go in and fix some white areas with your embossing pen. You could use your embossing multimedia brush. I think the pen is easier with these kinds of details. And so I'm just going to go in and add a little bit of detail through here and add a little bit more of our embossing powder to cover up these couple areas that were white. Here's how the panel looks. It looks very good. I'm going to stamp hello in the middle with polished silver. And when I did this, I realized that silver looked pretty amazing. And I thought, we can really make our own embellishments. We're going to keep this card to pretty much all embossing. So I decided to grab my mixed media brush, which if you haven't used this tool from Wow, it's definitely worth a purchase. So this is their embossing ink with like a paintbrush, kind of like a nail polish applicator that you can apply specifically to areas. Now, what I love about it is it applies a lot of ink, but to the specific area that you put it in. This gives your embossing more, I don't know. I would say it almost makes the embossing stand up more. So what I'm doing, I'm going to call these palm fronds. I don't know what they are in this folder, but I'm going to follow from the middle towards the outside, just trying to get at least the bottom third to 2/3 covered with ink. Then I'm going to double emboss, which means I've already got embossing taken care of on this panel. I'm going to emboss it again with silver. This is a way of just adding more interest to your panel, and it coordinates with that beautiful hello in the middle. I have finally decided that I don't need to mess up my sticky mat anymore and moved that away, so no worries on that one. And then I'm going to add this silver. Now in pictures, this is hard to see, but look at how the bottom parts of those little palm fronds are silver. They are going to look so amazing when we heat them up. I'm going to continue this silver all the way around the middle, but you just heat until you've melted that middle silver and it looks so nice. It's just quite a nice extra touch. So I'm going to continue with this process all the way around this center hello, and I'll show you what it looks like. And here's what it looks like. Can you see that silver all around the center of this card? I'm going to show you another way to use your embossing powders, but this one is so fun. Okay, let's move to card number 2 and some more techniques. We're going to start with an A2 size piece of paper. We're going to use our anti-static powder all over this. You see that I have the embossing folder open. The piece of paper is laying on what people often refer to as the debossed side. This means that the impression on that part of the embossing folder sinks in. And then we're going to put embossing ink on the raised part. So on both of these two cards, when we're applying embossing ink, we're applying it to raised surfaces. But generally what we're doing by applying it to the folder is actually going to push that embossing ink down into the paper, almost like more of a letterpress than a raised up image. So let me show you the difference. Carefully close this and try not to move your piece of paper. I tend to grab it and hold it closed and then send it through my die cutting machine. So here's what we have. Our image is debossed into the folder. So hopefully all of that embossing ink has pressed down into these little wells, and now we can add embossing powder. So this time I am using, not doing it over my sticky mat again, and just trying to add these different colors. It's really nice because the little wells kind of catch the color. And so on this one, I kind of did opposite sides, opposite colors versus mixing the colors, which gives it just a little bit different look, but I love how it turns out. So let me heat this up and I'll show you the difference and we'll add a few little details. So here it is all heated up, and I'm going to put it next to the other panel because they are similar. When you see them up close, they're not, but when you look at this embossing powder is down in the image. This embossing powder, and this is before we add the silver to it, is standing up. Let me try to zoom in and see if you can see these better. So to me, the left one is more airy and kind of abstract, and the right side is a little bit more detailed. I don't know why that is. I think it's because the embossing powder is confined to a specific area and there's no little overlaps, but I love how they both look. So I used the same sentiment just to kind of keep it consistent. This hello from an Altenew pack that I have. Of course, I will put all of this in the description for you so you will have the items that I used. And I'm going to do this in that polished silver, add just a few little details, and we will be done with this card. Now, I would highly suggest polished silver if you haven't gotten this powder yet. It makes such a cool look. So I'm going to heat emboss this middle, and we're only going to use the silver powder on this one in or on the sentiment, and then I'm going to add these little metallic pearls, just 4 of them around the edges here, just to keep it simple. But do you see how easy this could be to just make those quick cards that you need, create multiple at the same time, or create a pack of cards because you can just color coordinate these embossing powders. No coloring necessary. How nice is that? We don't have to strain our hands. All we have to do is just dump a little bit of powder on it. Okay, let's look at these up close. So I'm going to hold each one up and then we're going to do kind of a side angle so you can see this. Look at how beautiful that silver turned out on those edges. Just so easy. And if you don't own anything but embossing powder, very easy to do. This one we added those few little pearls and the image is depressed into the paper. Okay, so it gives it a little bit more, to me, defined look than the other one. I also kept the colors kind of in separate corners, so that makes that just a little bit different versus just randomly putting it on. You'll see there's always a little bit of grunginess to these. None of them are perfect because when you are putting the powder on, you may get your ink a little bit off, but it doesn't matter. It looks amazing on both of these. And just think, you could change up the sentiment. You could make so many cool cards just with a couple of embossing powders and one embossing folder. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe for the channel. Everything I used will be linked in the description, so grab those products if you need them. Have a great day. Bye!